Where we're going next is really that we need more fueling. So the first step in that process is that we have purchased a set of injectors here. These we purchased through Drew. They're S&S, and my understanding is that these would be good for approximately 100 horsepower per injector. So that's how much fuel they're flowing. That doesn't mean the rest of the engine can keep up with that we have enough air, compression, cooling, all of that to keep up with it. But these injectors would have the potential of bringing this engine to 600 horsepower. Now, they're perhaps overkill, but it gives us headroom for later in case we decide to go really crazy with this thing at a later time. All right, so we get started on installing the new injectors by removing the old ones. First, I removed the clips from the fuel return lines, and you'll see me using a curved set of needle nose pliers in order to pry them off. They do come straight up and off after the pins are removed. Next, I loosen each of the high pressure lines that go from the rail to each injector. You'll note as I remove them that I get out my paint marker and I number them. Now, I know that the interface will change on the injector side, but it is nice to have things at least reseat on the rail side and not have to worry about whether everything's going to seal. I've always done this. I just like to put things back where they were. So then I pull them all off, mark them, and I put them into the little white container you see on the upper left. Now with that done, I go through and I loosen the bolts which hold down each of the injectors. I just start by loosening them all. Then I get out my speed handle, and as you can see here, speed handles are super, super fast. Who needs power tools? Haha, okay. So this is sped up video, but the bottom line is that I do like on things like this to have a feel for what I'm doing. I don't want to always use power tools because you don't always get a feel for what you're doing. Anyhow, I go next and I get my magnet and I pull out each of the screws as well as the little lever arm that holds down each of the injectors. The first injector was a little tight, so I used a wrench to scoot it back and forth a little bit, and then I was able to pull it out by hand. It came out cleanly and easily. And then from there, I just went through and pulled out all the rest by hand. No problem. No evidence of Black Death anywhere. Now, two of the sealing washers stayed down in the bores, so I took a screwdriver and just scooted them to one side. By doing so, I was able to make sure I could get at an edge on the sealing washers and pick them up, pull them out with a bent piece of wire. As you can see here, here's one of them being removed. Next, I go to ream, and I always put grease on the reamer. A lot of the reason for that is that you're going to create some chips when you are cutting. Now, you don't want to overdo this. You just want to do enough that you are having a good, clean seat that the injector and its copper ring will interface with in order to make certain you have a really good seal. Again, you don't want Black Death, which is caused by crud leaking out. Here you can see some of the chips collected, and you can see why I use the grease. The grease helps capture some of the chips because you don't want them going down the bore. And so I go and I hit it again, get some more chips. Then I realize I should really clean out all these bores very carefully for any crud that might be in there. And I do this repeatedly throughout the process. I didn't always videotape it, but here you can see me using the end of an appropriately sized dowel with a rag wrapped around it. That allows me to, when I push the rag down in there and rotate the dowel, it helps me clean out the bore. And then I'm able to go through and ream. What you can't see is me pausing to wipe down and re-grease the reamer as I move from cylinder to cylinder. But that's the way I did it. And, there's a quick snapshot of some chips. And I go back through and clean everything again. Again, I cleaned it quite a few times. I didn't capture it every time on video. And here I am vacuuming it again, just making sure everything's nice and clean. And here you can see the bores as we are ready now to install the new injectors. Each one of those seats is nice and clean and smooth. Here I take the first injector and I've applied anti-seize, copper anti-seize. Now, Mercedes will tell you to use their own special ceramic anti-seize. I've actually used just the copper stuff a number of times on OM648 engines. And on this one in the past, I did have to remove the valve cover once because I had a pretty nasty valve cover leak when I bought the engine. That's back when I painted the valve cover because it was off and I could. But the bottom line is that I had the injectors out before. I did things this way and I've had no ill effects. And the main point of the grease is just to make certain that things don't corrode in place and become a real pain to remove it when you have to remove them again someday. The other thing is that some will say it also helps the seal seat a little bit better. So I put each of these in by hand, rotate them into location, and once they're installed, somehow I didn't get footage of me installing and tightening these. It's important, first of all, that this piece here, whatever you call it, pawl or whatever, there's an indent on the bottom side of it, and it has to go over like a ball bearing shape that's underneath here in order to lever properly, because you're using this as a pivot point to hold down the injector over here. Now, when you tighten these, well, actually, before you put these in, the best thing to do is take an old bolt and run each one down the hole. And I counted about 20 turns, roughly 19 or 20 turns on each one, just to make certain I didn't have any crud down in the hole that might cause me to bottom out and not torque the bolt properly. I mean, you know, you could reach the proper torque, but not be holding down the injector the way you need to be. But anyhow, this is the pivot point, and this is holding down the injector. This gets torqued to 7 Newton meters, and then you turn it 90 degrees, and you come back and turn it 90 degrees again. So you are torquing to yield on this. You will feel it yield as you twist. Don't panic. It's the way it's supposed to be. I know a lot of people wimp out and don't do the second 90 degrees. I went ahead and did that on all these, so that they're torqued correctly, especially since we're going to be dealing with higher horsepower, higher pressures. I want to make certain that everything is absolutely right. All right, so now that they're torqued and in place, I reconnect all the connectors and reconnect the return line. Now, each one of those connections has a little O-ring. They're a little stiff to push down in there. I use a very sophisticated tool for this job, which is the back of a ratchet, to just lightly tap them and get them down into place. Now, one thing you'll note, if you have any issues whatsoever with installing the pins, it's because you haven't actually seated it fully. So you'll see me sometimes go back in and tap it again. Next, I pull out the high pressure fuel lines. They're numbered, so you'll see me bouncing back and forth. I'm just pulling them out, looking at the number, installing them in the correct location. Then I go through and tighten everything. After I've tightened them down finger tight in order to make certain that everything's properly seated. And then at that point, the injectors are installed and we are ready to roll. Now, in another video, I'm going to cover the pump and some other parts that were a part of this upgrade. So come back soon and you'll see more on this project. Thanks for watching.